it's not often asked, but that's something that I would definitely ask.
You are listening to the Property Developer Podcast, your home for tips, ideas and inspiration to help take your developing to the next level. Now here's your host, Justin Getty.
Hello and welcome to episode 94 of the show. Thanks for joining me. How are you going? Keeping well? Projects ticking along? I'm doing fine, thank you. Things are pretty good in Melbourne, apart from the weather. It's been a bit up and down, which makes construction challenging at times. But things move along. Got a great show coming up for you today. We're going to be talking about selling off the plan. Just before we get to that, here's a quick project update for you. Things are continuing with the frames on site at Cambridge Road, which is good. We've now finished the ground level brickworks on 8 of the 14 units, and it's looking really good. And the scaffolding is going up so that work can start on the upper levels, which will be good to see. On my other project, we are in the final stages of our planning application. We've finalised the design and we're just making some finishing touches to the report to ensure that we present the strongest possible application. So it'll be good to get that in and see how we go. A couple of quick announcements before we get to our guest for today. Don't forget the property developer training is available if you're interested in learning how to become a property developer. You can head to propertydevelopertraining.com. There's now 2 trainings there, which is awesome value. You've got the original property developer training and the taking it to the next level training for those wanting to go bigger and full time. So even more value for you in the training. You can grab a copy of my book, Become a $1 Million Property Developer, at propertydeveloperpodcast.com/book. Contains a lot of the big lessons that I've learned in my developing career and might be helpful for you if you're considering getting into property development. And there's also the quiz if you want to find out how ready you might be to become a developer. And you can take that at propertydevelopertraining.com/quiz. And finally, don't forget you can catch me on Insta and Facebook under the handle of Property Developer Podcast if you want to see how my projects are progressing. Okay, on to today's guest, Ben Khong from Chisholm Gamon. Ben has been working in property sales for the last couple of decades, mainly selling off the plan property. So he brings a wealth of experience to this conversation and lots of practical tips for your next sales campaign. We talk about how you can seek out the best agent to help market and sell your project, the importance of pricing and monitoring the response of the market to your campaign, and the importance of understanding who your likely buyer is and what they actually want from a property. Keep an ear out for Ben's thoughts on what kinds of issues can come up in a design that may put buyers off. This is another great conversation about selling off the plan. So let's kick off by finding out what Ben's favourite meal is.
I think it would have to be some form of Italian, maybe a pasta dish.
Yeah, you need to be a bit more specific than that.
I'll go with tortellini bolognese.
Oh, simple?
Yep. It's been a favourite since I was a kid, and it never seems to change, always delivers.
Is this something that you can punch out yourself, or is it something that you get at a restaurant?
Definitely like making the bolognese sauce, but I have never bothered to take it to the level of producing the pasta. Too easy to buy.
Oh, yes. And have you got a secret bolognese recipe?
Yeah, I think mine it's all about good produce and blending multiple meats. So veal, pork, and beef mince.
Ooh, a triple play.
Yes.
Oh, I haven't heard about that before.
Well, maybe we can do a cooking segment next time.
Oh, that'd be quite popular. The property podcast goes cooking.
/ food.
Well, here we are again talking about property, and in this episode, we're going to cover off selling off the plan. You have a lot of experience doing project sales, but before we get to that, give us a bit of a rundown about yourself and how you ended up in property?
Yeah, good question. I've been in the industry for almost 30 years now, and mainly off the plan sales. But it actually started quite by accident. I was working up at Mount Hotham, and I had three roles. So I used to work in the bar a couple of nights a week. I worked in skier services, and my main role was working at ski school. So I was a pretty visible person up on the hill, and I used to get a lot of clients on chairlift rides. You can't talk skiing all day, and they would often ask, what's going on up here with property? And that was a time when Hotham had just been purchased by BCR Asset Management, and their grand plan was to basically turn it into a super resort and take it from club lodges to premium economy and accommodation. And so I got to know the local agent up there, and he basically said, look, you're crazy, why don't you finish out this season doing what you're doing, but learn the role through me and come and work with me. So that's how it all started. And it was a great way to, I suppose, be a pretty visible person in that arena, but also it was quite isolated, so there wasn't a lot of competition. We basically had all the developments, so yeah, it felt like it was certainly mine to stuff up.
I've been up to Hotham and been skiing there before, and I don't recall seeing a real estate agency up there in the village, but perhaps I've mistaken.
Yeah. So it's definitely Castron. Still to this day, they're very prolific across really Hotham and Bulla in particular. But you're probably right. The main thing was not to have boards everywhere. And yeah, we used to do a lot basically through the office, but certainly database.
And so talk us through those first few years. What kind of projects were you doing? What were you doing? What did you learn?
Yeah, so there were two apartment projects. One was basically the add-on to the Zerkes building. And then the second one was White Crystal, which was essentially a totally new build, which it's really the super centre up there. So everything is in the base of the building. So restaurants, cafes, ski school, ticketing, you name it, it's there. Retail components as well, and then apartments above. And then on the top of the basin site there, the freestanding chalets, known as the Hotham Heights chalets. So they're all basically 3 and 4 bedroom freestanding homes. Yeah. So yeah, what was it? It was probably around 100 individual sales in that time. We were very well backed. We had the ability to work from the hill or from Melbourne. So we had an office in Melbourne in St Kilda Road, and we had the ability for properly vetted clients to fly them up via either plane or helicopter, which was quite an experience in itself. So it was on-site selling largely through the season, and at prolific times such as an Easter or maybe a Christmas, where you have a lot of holiday makers up in the area, and then the rest of the time it was done from Melbourne and with the use of the helicopter.
Well, a young salesperson, Ben, must have been thinking pretty highly of themselves on a helicopter ride up to Hotham from Melbourne.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was a great start into selling because you were so focused. Like, can you imagine sitting in a helicopter for best part of an hour and a half with a group of guests that all don't potentially know each other? You've got to keep it upbeat and pacey, and so you're a bit of a tour guide as much as a real estate salesperson. So you've all got headgear on, and like it was a little bit like this. You're very good at prompting me with these questions, and I had to do the same with them.
Well, you certainly had a captive audience. Good time to get the sales presentation rolling.
Yes, they certainly spent the day with you. So there was none of this kind of rocking up to an inspection and leaving after 5 minutes. You were often in a car to Essendon Airport, and then, we actually had the luxury of flying out from Melbourne High often, or Burnley golf course. So but you certainly had a focused day with the group.
And how long were you doing that for?
So I was in that system for about 5 years. Yeah. So it was basically looking after. We used to do a lot of coastal as well. So areas like Lorne, we did the Erskine House development there with them also.
And what did you learn in that 5 years?
A lot about design, a lot about specification, materiality, and of course construction. Because with these off the plan sales, it's one thing to get someone through to a contract, but then you've got to keep them informed during the course of the build, and then actually take them through at settlement stage and point out to them what they've purchased.
And what about learning about buyers, off the plan buyers?
Yeah, you do learn a lot about them. You learn about how serious they are pretty quickly. You have to learn about their needs, whether they're buying purely for investment or if it's something that they're going to live in as an owner occupier. You get quite a mix of emotions and needs across both of those types of buyers. Some people are very interested in the detail and some are more big picture. And I think you learn about people's attention spans a lot also, because I think I like to start a lot of my presentations with the question, how long do you see this taking? Like, have you allocated half an hour, or are you happy to sit here for an hour? Because, some people certainly require a pacier presentation.
Very true. Well, let's continue on. What happened after that? Continue on your potted history of work experience.
So I think the next move was very interesting for me. When we were selling Zerkes, that was built by the Glenville Group. So I was getting all these great connections, during the course of learning the trade. And Len Warson, who is the owner and head of Glenville, he said, "Look, I think you'd be great doing design construct work with him." So I went to Glenville for actually about the same time. I was there for about 5 years, and that was working so totally off the plan, but you're working with basically clients that have already commissioned or purchased a block. So it was about designing and specifying a full house from the ground up. So you would be involved with organising demolition of the existing home, and then what you could actually, or could or couldn't put on the block, and it was very broad. It was basically every aspect of a home, and you were also overseeing landscaping, pools, really the whole venture. So that was an incredible learning space.
Is that just for single dwellings?
Yeah, largely. I did have a couple of duplex jobs in there, and because that company was so broad, they had a special projects division. We even had one client come in that built the Bass Coast Golf Resort just down at San Remo. So, yeah, I think the smallest job I worked on might have been a build cost. We're going back 20 years here, where you could build a house. A reasonable house for $300,000, and I think the highest build costs were around the kind of $2 million, and that used to get you a 40 square home built in largely in kind of Stonington or Burundara or Bayside with a basement and a lift, and that's probably double now. And then I think the golf resort was that was like a $16 million build, so there was quite a range of work there.
You're lucky to get a front door for $300,000 these days.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then where to?
You what yourself, Justin? It sounds like.
Oh yeah, then it's only $250.
Yeah.
Then what happened?
From there, I went and worked with Look Property Group, and from that stage through to where I am now, it's all been off the plan sales. And where I'm now with Chisholm Gamon, I'm very privileged to be able to work as much on established as off the plan, because with COVID, I think we all had to be extremely adaptable, and working in the position that I have here, I can certainly do both.
Yes, well, you were there working with an old friend of the show, Sam Gamon, who was actually one of the very, very first guests that I had on the podcast.
A great man. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, good guy, or a good friend of mine. And so, what is it about off the plan selling that has kept your interest and that you enjoy?
I think I always liked the idea of setting up for a campaign and the ability that you would get multiple sales out of it. There's certainly more work in setting up an off the plan venture as opposed to a one-off house or apartment or whatever it be. But I think I still do enjoy the scale that you can get. You can only sell a house, once, whereas we can set up with our townhouse and apartment developments. And, if we're good at what we're doing, we can sell 10 or 20 with these boutique projects in, hopefully a space of 3 or 12 months.
And so, what is it about the setting up of the campaigns that you like to focus on and that you find most interesting or inspiring?
I think all the elements are probably as important, but I think getting the renders right is probably the most important, because that's that picture that tells our clients, what they're looking at. I think floor plans will excite people, to a certain degree, and it's more about the relevance of the floor plan, but the actual visual, what does this building look like? What does the bathroom look like? What does the kitchen look like? The spaces, the gardens, how it's all put together, ultimately is what makes someone, press a button to go further, or, pick up the phone to book that appointment to come and see us.
Yeah, it's a part of the process that I have a particular interest in, the selling bit.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah. Well, we can organise that fly on the wall if you want to. You can sit in on some presentations if you ever want to, or come along to any nights we ever have.
Oh, I'd love to be on a CCTV camera in a agent's meeting on one of my projects with a prospect. What are the questions you get asked? What are the answers they get given? It's just, you can't really get that info unless you're in the room.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I think for anyone, when you're doing multiple presentations of the one product or development, not every presentation has to be the same. So if you're someone that's naturally aggressive, you can pull back and see how it goes for you, and vice versa. If you're naturally someone that's a bit timid, go your hardest and just see how it goes. Like I was mentored down that way early in my career, and I think it was the best thing that was ever suggested to me was, with every second phone call, say, "Oh, so Justin, would you like to come in for a presentation?" And then the next Justin, what I need you to do is meet me tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I've got half an hour spare, and just see what works, because they do both work. Yeah. But you learn the efficiencies of being politely forward and kind of committing people to a schedule.
Oh, like the number, I've always marvel at the number of phone calls that get made, and the level of rejection that agents have to deal with.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a kind of, it's not a personal, well, it shouldn't be personal, but the fact is most of your meetings or presentations don't necessarily end up in a sale.
No, I mean, and we're emotional beasts as well. Like, you have to know how you feel on a day. Like if I'm feeling, a bit washy, I'm not going to make 50 phone calls where I should be feeling really upbeat, because I just won't be as good in them. Yeah. So you've got to kind of make your mark.
Yeah, it's a interesting business, but must be very exhilarating to get those sales.
It is, and it's funny. I'm 51, and I was talking with my partner about this. I still, I had an off the plan sale sign up 2 days ago, for 3.2 million, and I was, and forget the dollar amount. If it was 600,000, I was actually still just as pumped as, my first 10 sales. It's still a buzz and a feeling and emotion that sits in you. And it's exciting.
Well, if you're the architect, I don't mean that in development sense, but an architect of a campaign, and you put it all together and then it comes to fruition, there's a deep sense of satisfaction with that strategy working, where you end up with that sale.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you could not be truer words.
And so when you're actually, prior to preparing the campaign, when you have a developer come and talk to you about a prospective project, what are the things that you're looking for in that developer / client before you even take them on or get excited about their potential project?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we get a great mix. Sometimes they come in and they've actually done all the work and they're basically saying, this is ready to go. What do you think about pricing? What can we get? How are you going to stage it? What mediums are you going to use? But they're actually ready to go. So that's good in it, that it's very efficient for us. On the other side, it's nice when you are involved right from the infancy, because you can take more ownership of how well the whole venture ultimately goes. So, we often have our core developers that we actually help choose sites, so that they mightn't have even purchased the site yet. So you can look at it and really profile the site and the development. So, will it be townhouses? Will it be apartments? How many are you going to actually put on there? Price point, product mix. And then you're, of course, involved in the design and the specification part of it. That is definitely my passion, that part. I love design.
And what does that stem from, and what does that actually mean, design?
Where does it stem from? In our family group, we have a lot of architects and designers as friends and in our family. And I think I've always looked at them as really interesting people. Was probably the same for you. You looked at your parents' friends and thought, all right, that looks like fun, maybe not so. And yeah, they always looked very stylish, and they looked like their day job was something that, had great appeal to me.
And so what are the elements of design now that you see as cornerstones or that underpin the projects that you like to work on?
That is a great question. I think the biggest thing is getting the flow and the ratios, the proportions of whatever it is, the house, the townhouse or the apartment, correct. We see a lot of products where, it might have bedroom accommodation and bathroom accommodation for, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms. But if you look at the living space or if you look at the kitchen, it just wouldn't work if you had that many people living in that environment. So yeah, I think that's hugely important, and really understanding who is it that's going to buy what you're actually marketing. We largely deal with boutique projects, and I'd say at least 50% of those projects are downsizes. So you're talking about a couple. So do they need 3 and 4 bedrooms? Potentially not. 2 bedrooms with a flexi room, like a study or a multi-purpose room, whatever you want to call it, that works really, really well. But what they're ultimately looking for is a kitchen and a living space with similar volume to what they're used to, so that they can still have all their friends over, entertain in a comfortable manner. Yeah, so I think ratio and flow of the designs is super important. So
the earlier that a developer can engage with an agent, the better, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I think so, for sure, because you can easily sit down with an architect or someone in design and tell them what you want. They aren't necessarily at all involved in how marketable it is or how well it sells or how appropriate it is to an area. They may just sit down and design to the brief, and it's not necessarily going to work. I suppose, and trust me, I'm not at all saying here that the real estate agent's the most important part of the process, but we are potentially involved from the start to the finish. So, look, if I'm the one that has to sell it, I do like to be involved in that part of the process.
It's actually a really key position in a project, and often one position that you have as a developer, limited management and control over the person that's doing it if it's a outside agency or person that's selling on your behalf.
Correct. I've certainly had both in-house roles as well as agency roles. And with in-house, I worked with Neo Metro for 5 years, and they do incredible products, and they are a developer that actually design and build their own work. So they really enjoyed having control over all aspects of the venture.
Yeah, I've often said I would love to be able to be a fly on the wall in some of those sales presentations meetings for some of my off the plan sales to know what the agents are actually telling people.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If you are very trusted and if you've been well vetted, they know your style already. They've often mystery shopped you. They've had recommendations around you from industry people. So, they know whether you're the type of person that gets to know the project intimately and can sell the benefits of it, or if you're, conversely the other side that will just wing it and say whatever it takes. And probably most people fall in the middle. But look, you either get scripts and dialogues where you're asked to only say certain things. I think in many ways that makes that very easy for agencies. They can just say, all right, look, Justin, stick to this. Or, you can be given that real estate artistic license, if you're trusted, to sell it the way you see it.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about product knowledge, because I'm forever surprised at, and this is a broad general statement, just the limited understanding of the product that agents are selling. And this often applies just to existing real estate. But you think, hang on, you're selling $1 million plus property and you don't know how many bathrooms it's got. You ring them up and you ask them questions and they don't know some of the basic stuff about this very expensive product. And you think, if I went to a phone store, they would actually, the salespeople there know more about the $1,000 product than you know about this $1 million product.
Yeah, it is very true. I think if you're buying something that you can sit in and stand in and touch and feel, it's much more onerous on the purchaser, I suppose, to make those decisions. And if you're lucky enough to have someone there that can point out all the benefits and how things work, that works very well together. But you certainly, with project selling, if you don't know the way something's put together, if you don't know the brands, if you don't know the specifications, we really do have to know and be across every part of what you're selling.
Yeah, I think it's such a symbiotic relationship between the developer and the salesperson, because as you say, you're actually through a fair bit of the project, particularly the meaty bit from the pre-sales through construction to then settlement. And your reputation, the agent, I mean, their reputation's on the line, maybe even more so than the developer in some respects, because in many ways they're the face, they're the front office.
Yeah, it's very true. With the boutique developments, you'll often, after you've had multiple meetings, you will have an introductory meeting where they want to meet someone from the development team, or perhaps the architect, or whatever it is. It's different with each client. But there are many where you are the face of that sale, of that apartment, townhouse, the whole way through.
And so when a developer is considering or vetting or looking for a potential agent for their project, what do you recommend that they look for?
I think you would have to look at some form of track record. You'd want to look at experience, how long you've been in the game for, success of projects that you've worked on, price point of projects, that you've worked on. There's no point in engaging someone that largely sells investor grade stock to do high-end owner occupier and vice versa. And one thing that I think is important with anything in life, with anyone that you're engaging, is what are you working on currently, and what time will you be able to dedicate to my project?
And which should be what? How much time do you reckon an agent should be spending?
I think you need to strike that balance individually between agent and developer. If they've got a small development with, say, 6 townhouses or apartments to sell, you're obviously not going to be having half a day every day on that. But I suppose it comes down to inquiry levels and how the inquiry is handled, how they like it to be handled, and then you can kind of format from that how much time you need to have available. But it is interesting. It's not often asked, but that's something that I would definitely ask.
And what about how you make a project stand out in a crowded marketplace?
There's it's a great question. We find that a lot of the specifications, facades, they do look very similar. So I always think it comes down first and foremost to the site that you've bought. So if you can spruik that you've got the premier position, I think that always puts you ahead of the pack. But very much pricing. You obviously have to adhere to margins so that the whole venture is profitable and worthwhile. But you also need to kind of meet the market in some form as well. So it's that balance of making the product appetizing enough, but also so that the developer is going to have the success they need as well.
And so what are those sort of levers that you pull to make it appetizing?
Well, you can fluctuate pricing. So you can start off with a price point to get some sales in the market and early, because people do like to buy products that they see other people have bought. I hate calling it sheep or herd mentality, but as humans, we feel safer when we know someone else is committed to something. So I think getting your entry-level pricing at the start of a project so that it looks appetizing and someone actually wants to commit, because as you have more success during the course of the sales campaign, you can always fluctuate and influence your pricing up, or vice versa. If it's very slow and you maybe started too high, you'll find yourself in a position where you either have to look at different funding models or lowering prices to get the sales.
Yes, actually, that's a point I remember Sam making when I spoke to him all those years ago, just the importance of the opening pricing model or pricing level.
Yeah,
it's really important to get that right when you're starting off for your campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at you're going to have many pricing meetings before you actually go to market with your leading prices. But if you have a campaign and you get some success, with inquiry instantly, and if in one weekend you had, just say you're selling 10 houses, if you had 10 people say, all right, I want to pay a reservation, perhaps you were a bit light on price. And so as the success is coming in, you can easily call, it's the opposite of a crisis meeting. It's an early success meeting. You can easily say, look, Justin, I think you need to get in here. We've had 5 presentations today. They all want to be in. Do you think we should put the pricing up a little? So yeah, you've always got that ability to move quickly.
Those phone calls, unfortunately, come few and far between.
Yeah, I haven't had to make too many either. But it's always there. It's always there.
And in terms of some of the tactical measures that you can use in a launch or to generate excitement, you got any go-tos?
It's interesting. I end up doing a lot of one-on-one appointments because I'm largely on boutique developments, but having opening nights, opening launches where you invite multiple people along. Look, it was something that was impossible in COVID. Everything had to be one-on-one, and we're now in a flexible space, where we can still do that. But I think a lot of people still, like to have a one-on-one. But it always worked well previously, just having launch nights where you would have multiple people in a room at once presenting to a group where everyone can, sign contracts or put down reservations straight away. So it builds competition and FOMO.
Yeah, so some social proof.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the next trigger is a time frame on a reservation. So, typically we're not asking someone, to sign a contract straight away. We're normally giving a 3, 5, 7, whatever number of days that's agreed to reservation period. So it just means that you can have your week to properly consider without feeling too much pressure before you commit. But certainly at the end of that reservation period, if you can't make your commitment, you have to deal with, as the potential purchaser, you have to deal with the fact that you might miss out on that apartment or townhouse.
And then talking about responding to market conditions at the time of recording, we're in a softening market. So what's your advice to people out there who might be trying to sell stuff off the plan in a market where it's soft?
Well, what we're saying is that the projects that are in the ground are obviously gold, because with building prices as they are at the moment, land prices, really aren't coming back at all. It's actually more and more expensive to put a project to market and for it to be viable. So as much as it's potentially a softening market in certain areas, if you want these new developments, you still have to pay the price that you're marketing at in this market. But I think your competition is less, and we feel like you're going to see less projects actually going to market. So I think the pricing of what's on currently, is probably right.
And so it's just focusing more on future value during a sales presentation?
Yeah, look, I think it's future value, but also that the product is going to be scarce. There aren't going to be. I mean, Melbourne's been mad over the last 3 decades with projects, but they're probably, they're definitely less going to market already. So it's a bit more unique.
Yeah, I definitely think there are people struggling to get projects out of the ground. So if they're not already started, they're going to be delayed by however long. So I think in sort of 12 to 18 months, there's going to be a bit of a shortage of supply, particularly in Melbourne, maybe Sydney as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I was thinking about questions that you might ask me today, and thanks for sending the list through that you did. But questions that you would get, call it 10 years ago, were largely around design and what finishes, particularly around marbles and what tapware is it. I think that top of the list of questions at the moment are when will the development start? When is it most likely to finish? And they really drill down on, who's the builder, what's the balance sheet look like, how viable, is this, because owner occupiers want to know an end date for moving in.
Yes, they've always been important questions. The start date's obviously pretty critical. I always thought that can be challenging for the agent to try and answer, and it's not something they have any real control over, apart from selling quickly enough to make the pre-sales. And then subsequently the end date ones also can be a bit of a challenge when selling off the plan.
Yeah. Look, we certainly spend a lot of time having to relay our own gut feel on how long it would take to get to 60% or 70% sold to commence construction. And look, that's something that I always was trying to be very, very accurate with. And largely, by the number of reservations that you have and by the numbers of inquiry that are coming in, what it's going to look like. You can kind of extrapolate your presentations to contracts to numbers of sales. But it's also great if you have developers, and it's only going to happen on smaller projects, but if you have developers that actually have engaged a funding model where they can start construction without the pre-sales, that builds an enormous amount of trust in not just the development group, but obviously the project.
And then you touched on staying in contact with buyers after the sale. And I reckon this is a big opportunity for a lot of smaller developers out there who might be doing smaller townhouse projects. What do you do along the way in terms of keeping people informed, or what do you recommend developers do or the agents do to keep people informed?
Yeah, so the easy one, and once again, these things all come down to workload and time management, but the easiest is like a quarterly EDM, so where you're just sending out a piece with maybe... It's very easy to go to site and just get the iPhone, snap from the front, snap from the back, and if you've got any aerial ability, it's pretty exciting to see a hole in the ground, even more exciting to see a basement constructed. But once you're up out of the ground and you can see structure, that really makes people feel like, or you can see the shell and the shape of what you're buying. So that's the easiest, is to send out EDMs. I'm pretty old-fashioned. I like to pick up the phone, and I think the best one is you meet down there on the Saturday or the Sunday whenever you're finished in your sports gear, and have a coffee and have a walk around the site with them. If you have a developer and a builder that are okay with maybe one site visit during construction, it's often nice when you're at frame stage to be able to walk them through a shell as well.
Yeah, so what I like to do is when I have a monthly on-site meeting with the builder and everyone, I'll whip the phone out, do a quick piece to camera with a 30-second update about what's happening.
Yep.
And then shoot some overlay vision just around the site. And it's actually really easy to cobble something together, and then shows exactly what's going on. Then you can share that with your buyers. Doesn't need to be a Hollywood production.
No, exactly, and it just shows that you're there regularly as well. We working with Chisholm Gamon, 90% of what I'm on is within Elwood, and the furthest away I am is South Yarra, and I've got one about to launch in St Kilda. But it's interesting. I find a huge or very high percentage of my buyer group are all very local anyway, so it's very easy to, they update themselves essentially. I think if I was in the same scenario, I can't see why I wouldn't want to drive past the site every fortnight.
Yeah, well, you want to see progress is happening. Certainly when the demolition takes place is always pretty exciting and worthy of updating people about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, most of the projects that I'm working on are boutique townhouse projects at the moment, and they tend to have a basement and 3 levels or 2 levels above. So the time frames for construction are generally 16 to 18 months. So it's pretty efficient.
And then what's happening with some of your clients just with the escalating build costs and uncertainty about the next year or two in relation to sales? Is it a factor?
With these off the plan contracts, the price is 100% locked in. Yeah, so there's no clause in there for material change, which I know happens with house builds. So I think that would be nervy for a lot of clients, that are building homes, that their build could end up being 10% or whatever it is more than what they initially signed in on. But I think that's one of those balances. If you want a fully fixed price contract in this day and age, you'd almost probably struggle to get a builder, I would imagine, for a house. Certainly with the commercial builds, they are set.
Yes, it's definitely a challenging time having a project under construction at the moment. I know that it's very fluid in terms of what the final cost is going to be, which can be a bit of a challenge if you're fully sold or 80% sold because you don't have much wriggle room left at the end.
No, no. Look, it's funny. I don't think too many people feel sorry for real estate agents, and certainly not for developers. But it's a very tough time for developers in this cycle, with what's happened with building prices and actually getting trades. So what we're finding with most of the developers that we work with, they're very programmed with their Gantt charts, and they're meticulous with pre-ordering in a way that the industry didn't have to be pre-COVID. So it's impressive to watch from our end.
Yeah, it's good when people are more organized, that's for sure. And I also think for people out there that are maybe smaller developers or developers in general, if they can make it through the next 12 months or so, 18 months or so, there's probably going to be less players in the market, slightly less competition, I think.
Absolutely. You would imagine that this would have a bit of a Noah's Ark effect for the, if you want to call it the mum and dad developer, and some, professional developers as well.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely challenging at the moment, depending on where you are. Every market's different. There's going to be opportunities everywhere, but yeah, overall, definitely a more challenging time than perhaps in the last 10 years or so.
Definitely.
That's okay. We'll move through it. The cycle always keeps moving ahead and things will change. So, Ben,
Comes down to necessity, that side of it, doesn't it? And we've always had the privilege in Melbourne of population growth, plus immigration. So you would see that to be a continuing facet for Melbourne property.
the whole country, Australia is young with a growing economy or economy that needs to grow. So the government needs to bring people in to underpin the economy and pay taxes. So our population is going to grow, whether it's by a lot or by a little, it's going to grow. That will be government policy.
Totally agree.
So, all right, Ben. Well, a man with decades of experience, what is the best piece of advice you think you've picked up along the way?
In terms of what I'm doing trade-wise, I think it is understand what you're working on. Know who you're going to be selling to, and if you can see alarm bells, don't be afraid to actually voice your opinion, because the further you get into a project, it becomes somewhat too late. So I like to really back myself in and ask the hard questions at the start, so that it creates a smoother transition through the rest of the flow of the sales campaign and obviously getting the sales and construction. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions.
And what about yourself? What have you learned about yourself over the last decades? From a professional perspective, I mean, you can share your private one as well if you wish.
I think I've learned a lot. My dad was or is a very cool cat, and he always said, no matter what you're doing, every decade try and incorporate something new, influence something new. He never changed his profession. He was a doctor, but he even said, look, why think that you should be stuck in the one vocation for the rest of your life? So I love what I do, but I certainly work on all sorts of different things outside it. Yeah, and I think work-life balance is critical. We often in real estate end up working 6 and 7 days. So I think you need to get a piece of every day in a fashion that suits yourself. For some people that's getting up at 4 a.m. and getting it done before they start work, or some it's having a run at lunchtime, whatever it be. But yeah, for me, I live in a very privileged suburb, being in Elwood. I'm 200 metres from the office, so it's not difficult to come to work, and it's certainly not difficult to get to my listings. So yeah, I have no issue working virtually every day, but every day I'm also doing something for myself.
Yeah, it's not too difficult to negotiate the traffic if you're 200 meters up the road.
Yeah, we're not putting a lot of kilometres on our cars here at this office. Virtually everyone lives and works in the postcode. So, it's great.
Oh,
It affords you a lot more efficient time.
oh, well, that's good for your resale value with the price of secondhand cars. So you're doing well there. How about the skiing? Going back to the beginning, how are you still skiing?
Yes, yeah, it's the absolute passion, and which is also a family passion. So we had 4 trips up to the Victorian Alps this season. One of the best I can remember. Like, it was great from start to finish. So we got to Buller twice and to Falls Creek twice. Yeah, which was fantastic, and I know you also did.
Yes, just got back from Falls Creek. It was fun up there. I love going up to the high country, and they roll out the red carpet for you when you return to Hotham. You got a penthouse
Um,
apartment there still.
it's interesting. I do get nicely looked after, but with Hoth, stage of my life, I was there solidly for 10 years. But when my daughters were born, I decided Falls Creek was a much more family set up resort and a much kinder place to teach them. So we really have thrown ourselves back into Falls Creek. And when I say kids, they're 19 and 16 now. So, not kids, but yeah, we're firmly entrenched at Falls, but still, yeah, we still love Hotham. Try and get there every year. Didn't work out this year.
All right. Well, if people are interested in finding out more about you, Ben, where should they go looking?
Just come and see us at Chisholm Gamon. All contacts are on the website, and my mobile and email are very visible, of course.
All right. Well, any last parting comments or requests before we let you get back to selling off the plan?
Interest rates to be cut very shortly. Can you organise that for me?
I thought you were making the bold prediction. I do
Yeah,
think
no,
I do think they'll be cut next year. I think they're lifting them up to then give themselves some headroom to cut next year.
some buffer. Yeah, no, I
Middle of
agree.
next year, I think they'll start to cut it once they've got inflation under control and they realize they need to stimulate the economy again.
Yes, which will be great for all and sundry.
Yeah, so I think it's just a prediction. Maybe sort of middle to later half of next year, things start to pick up a bit with property values.
Look, we have seen we're about to launch some new projects, and we've seen the interest is still very high. So I think if it's bottoming out soon with the interest rates, I think we're going to be very busy again next year.
Yeah, and I think it depends on who you're dealing with in terms of buyers. So if you're dealing with high-end product with big dollar values, I think your buyer demographic's going to be a little bit more astute commercially, financially, than say your first homeowner buyer who might be more easily influenced and swayed by what gets published in mainstream media outlets or the sort of the barbecue commentary. So the different conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone that's 40 plus, rates sitting in and around 6 and 7%. You've been there many times before, and anyone that's first home buyer up to call it mid-30s. It's Nooseville. Sitting on 6 and 7%. It's the highest it's ever been. They've been born into largely, 1-2%. So it's big for these guys, but I think it's quite acceptable.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I can remember when my wife and I got our home loan under 5% and we were giving each other high fives.
Yeah, break out the champagne.
And then it went down to whatever it was, 1.95, so 2%. It's almost free money. It's quite unbelievable. We'll talk about these days when we're older. Remember when the interest rates were 0.25%, 0.5%? It's actually quite stunning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Ben, it's been awesome having you on the show. Been really good talking about selling off the plan. It's such a critical piece of a development project. So it's always nice to get insight from someone with your level of experience so that people can hone their campaigns and be well prepared for when they launch to market, so that they're having those conversations with the agent about having to increase the prices.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right. Thanks for being on the Property Developer Podcast.
You've been listening to the Property Developer Podcast. Tune in next time for more tips, ideas and inspiration to take your developing to the next level. For more developing love, make sure to visit propertydeveloperpodcast.com.